Hello, my name is Joanna and I'm feeling crafty. Welcome back to my YouTube channel where I talk all about sewing. So today I have a quick little tutorial for you, and in that tutorial we're going to make this little gift pouch. It's a very quick project. It will take you 10 minutes to make, maybe 10 minutes to cut, and you can use it for all sorts of things. If you can hear shouting in the background, that is my children, because it's midterm and everyone is here. Delightful. So this little pouch is very handy to go with a gift that you might buy. I often like to buy jewellery at local craft markets, and sometimes the jewellery doesn't come in a fancy box or packaging, so it just comes on a card. So I like to pop them in those little bags, and I happen to own a Cricut machine, so I can personalize it, but you don't have to. You can decorate it with buttons, like you can really go crazy depending on how much time you have, because this gift is for those occasions when you have no time whatsoever and you still want to give something handmade. So you can whip this up in 10 minutes and fill it up with whatever the caliber of the gift it is. You can put jewelry in it, or you can just put sweets if it's just a little small gift that is of no significance. So I'm going to show you how to make a pattern and how to make these little pouches. So to make a pattern for our pouch, what we're going to use is a cereal ball. So what we're going to do, we're going to trace the shape of the cereal ball onto a card or piece of paper, and then once that's done, we're going to shave off 2 inches of the top, and that is the pattern for your pouch. So what we will need to cut out of our fabric is 2 pieces for the outer, because our pouch is fully lined and beautifully finished on the inside. So we need 2 outer pieces, 2 lining pieces, and we also need those little tabs for the channels for our ribbon. And to determine the size of them, we need to measure, you know, that little, so whatever cereal ball you're using, measure this opening, and in my case it's a little bit it's 5 inches and a quarter. I'm going to ignore that quarter and just cut 5 inches by 2 and a quarter. Yeah, 2.5. So 2.5 by 5 is the size for my ball, but you do you, whatever ball it is that you're going to use. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do, we need to finish the raw edges of our channels. As you can see, they're just folded in half, and this side needs to be finished. So I'm going to double fold. I'm going to fold 1/4 inch and press, and then I'm going to fold that again, and I'm going to do that on all 4 of the short edges of my tabs. So once I pressed all of the 4 short edges of my tabs, I am going to top stitch them in place, and the seam allowance between the fold and my needle is about 1/8 of an inch. I am using straight stitch, and the length is 3 on my machine. I want a slightly longer stitch purely because it looks nice. So I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm going to stitch all the way. I'm going to back stitch at the end, and then I'm going to chain stitch the next one without wasting thread. chain stitching saves thread. Okay, so I'm going to back stitch and then stitch that all the way. So I'm going to do that for all 4 edges. Okay, so I have my both of my tabs, all the 4 edges finished, and I'm going to give them a quick press. And then once they are pressed, I am going to fold them in half, and then I'm going to press them in half like so. Okay, so my the channels are ready. I am going to find the center point of my channels by folding them in half and giving them a little crease. You can mark that with a marking tool, or just you know, if the crease is enough for you, that's enough. I might maybe make that mark. And I'm going to do the same thing for my outer pieces. It doesn't really matter where you attach them. Is it the outers or the linings? Okay, so once I find my center mark on my pattern piece and my tab, I'm going to match these center points, and then I'm going to pin my channel in place. Okay, depending on the weight of the fabric, you might use the clips. I am a straight pin kind of a girl, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other outer piece. Find the center point, match the center points, and pin together. Now I'm going to baste these channels before I assemble the outer pieces, and I'm going to be using 3 stitch length, and I'm going to so the seam allowance for this project is 3/8 of an inch, but this the basting has to be within the seam allowance, so I'm going to make my seam allowance smaller. Okay, so I'm basting it with, I think, 1/8 of an inch of a seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch and not sew through my pins, and I'm going to baste all the way. Okay, and I'm going to do the same for the other. Okay, so my channels are basted, and I'm going to now stitch the outer right sides together. I'm going to place my outer pieces right sides together. I'm going to pin around and stitch all around. Okay, and I'm going to do the same for the lining piece, with the only difference is that we need an opening here for turning our bag right side out. So I have marked myself about 1.5 inches or 2 inches of an opening, so I'm going to stitch, I'm going to back stitch, stitch all the way to the opening. I'm going to back stitch here, then I'm going to move my needle here, back stitch, and stitch all the way, and the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to stitch my outer piece now. I'm going to back stitch, and now I'm going to stitch all around. I'm a bit of a rebel, didn't even pin it. So you're stitching on a curve, okay? So just go slow and stop and pivot by hand if you need to, okay? Sewing curved edges can be a little tricky, so just slow down, and then you will have better control over your project. Okay, so I'm getting to the end, and I'm going to back stitch, and that's the outer done. So I'm sewing the lining piece now, and I stitched all around here, and I got to the opening, so I'm just going to back stitch. Okay, I'm going to lift my presser foot, and I'm going to move on to the other mark of the opening. I'm going to back stitch and sew the rest of my lining. Okay, remember we are leaving the gap so that we can turn our little pouch right side out. So both the outer and the lining are stitched together, and because this edge is curved, we want this to lie nice and flat when we turn it. So for that you can either clip into the curves, or I'm too lazy for that, so I'm just going to use pinking shears, and I'm going to trim the seam allowance with my pinking shears, both for the outer and for the lining, and that will allow the curves to lie nice and flat. Okay, so I trimmed the seam allowances for both the outer and the lining. Now you see that for the lining I didn't trim the seam allowance where the opening is. This will just allow a little bit chunkier seam allowance, will make it a little bit easier to stitch the opening shut at the end of the project. So next step is to turn the lining right side out. Okay, and what I like to do is I like to run a chopstick along that edge to push out that seam nicely, like so. So once you do that, just slide it inside the outer piece like so, and then you don't really have to tuck it in there neatly. We're going to match the side seams, and what we're also going to do is we're going to nest the seam. So one seam allowance goes this way and this seam allowance goes this way, and that way they kind of click in. Okay, so pin one side and then do the same thing for the other side, and again we're nesting the seams. This seam allowance goes to the left, this seam allowance goes to the right, and we're going to put the pin in there. And once the side seams are pinned, it's enough you just kind of tug on it and it will lie nice and flat. I'm going to put in another pin, and the same thing on the other side, and another pin here. So what we're going to do, we're going to stitch on the around it. It is going to be a bit tricky to get this under your presser foot, but nothing major. Okay, I'll show you how to do that. So as you can see, it's a little tight here, but we can manage that. So we're going to back stitch a little bit, then we're going to go forward. We're going to remove that pin because we do not sew through pins, and just gently tug to make more room, like so. Okay, so it is a bit tight, but nothing major. Okay, so we're going to stitch around, so we're going to come back to the same point where we started and back stitch at the end, and we are nearly done with our pouch. Okay, so you see I came back to the same spot. I'm going to back stitch, and that's done. So we are one seam away from finishing, so I stitched the opening on the round. I'm going to pull out the lining, and then through the opening that we left there, we're going to push it right side out, and our little pouch will be born. I always call this the bird thing of the bag. It's the most exciting part of it. Okay, so we're pretty much finished. The only thing we have left to do is to close up this opening. So I'm going to give it a quick press, and then we can stitch it. But before I do that, remember when I run my chopstick along the lining, I'm going to do the same thing for the outer. I just stuck my chopstick inside there, and I'm just going to push these seams out, and then I'm going to bring it to the ironing to press this opening nicely. Okay, so I just pushed in the seam allowance on to the inside. You don't really have to maintain a perfect curve here because it's going to be a little tricky. This is going to be on the inside anyway, so don't really care much about it. I'm just going to give it a quick press, and then I'm going to stitch it shut. So I'm at my machine now, and I'm going to close the opening. I'm going to use 2.5 stitch length straight stitch. I'm going to back stitch, and then with 1/8 of an inch I am going to stitch very closely to that edge. Okay, to the other side of the opening, and then I'm going to back stitch. Okay, and that's done. Okay, so the opening is now closed. We can tuck in the lining inside the outer and marvel at the beauty of this little pouch. Isn't she gorgeous? So everything is tucked inside, and the last thing we have to do is to put our drawstring in. So for the drawstrings, the way you measure them, you want to fold them in half because the drawstring will go all around. So fold it in half, and you want to have about 3 inches of a tail, okay? And you will need 2 pieces, okay? So I'm going to use a bodkin, and I'm going to thread my drawstring through the channel. Okay, so I'm going to start at one side, go all the way, and then I'm just trying not to get it twisted inside, and then I'm going to go into the other channel. Okay, so that's one side done, and then the other side you're going to start at the opposite end. So I'm going to attach my bodkin, okay, and I'm going to start on the opposite end. And I will try to get behind these guys and into the other channel. Oh, I got tangled. Phew, I managed to get it untangled. So as you can see, they are threaded to the opposite ends, and this is to allow for the cinching. Cinching is the word. Okay, so all you have to do is tie a little knot. Now, before you tie a little knot, if you have any beads, you can add a little decorative bead. I'm not sure if you can see this one. This one is a little bit lost on the sparkly ribbon, but if you have something pretty like that, I think it would make a very pretty detail. Okay, so I finished, I tied the knots, and they look a little messy, so I'm just going to trim them nicely just to tidy it over. Okay, give it a nice trim, and this is finished. And this is it. This is done. I think it looks very pretty, and you can fill it up with bits and bobs. Now for the pattern, as I said, I use the cereal bowl, but I recommend to trace it on a piece of cardboard, and once you have your pattern on something a little stiffer, it will be really quick and easy to whip up a lot of these. And I usually have a stack of them in my drawer, and if I don't have time to make something specifically for a gift, I just pull one out, maybe personalize it on my Cricut or not, and this is a beautiful, reusable, sustainable packaging for a nice little gift. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. If you did, give it a like and maybe a comment, and if you use it and make one of those of your own, please tag me on Instagram. My handle is @Joanna's Feeling Crafty, and I will put all of the dimensions in the description box along with my Instagram details. Thank you so much, and I hope you find some time for a little creativity yourself. Bye!